Kalle, so
Hello.
I'll present the person I'm talking to. That's my student who have been in the bamboo since November last year, I think it was.
Yeah,
It
November.
wasn't such a long journey, but a very profound one. Kalle is 27 years old only, very young. And he is a classic pianist. He studied in Helsinki, also he studied in Barcelona. And he had a very interesting take on the movement practice, and he wrote a master's degree about how movement affected his piano playing. And just tell a little bit about your career as a piano player for now, and how did you get to Barcelona, and what did bring you to bamboo? So little by little.
Cool. So like a short bio about my piano playing. So I started a bit late. I was 13 when I started. And there had always been music in my home because my dad plays the piano, and he always used to play like children's songs for me and my siblings. And he was first and foremost like a blues and rock pianist, jazz and that sort of stuff. And that's what I started with as well. That's what I like wanted to do. But then after like maybe half a year or a year of playing the piano, I heard Chopin's music for the first time. And I was like blown away because I didn't know that sort of music existed. And then I started researching the topic more, and I was like, shit, this guy has what? Who can compose stuff like this? And so that got me interested in classical music. And as we say in Finnish, you get more hungry the more you eat. So I got more and more interested in it. And then when I was 15, I decided that I wanna become a pianist. So then I was playing with my teacher here in my hometown until I graduated from high school. After high school, I did my military service, and then I was accepted to the Conservatory of Helsinki to do a vocational program there, or vocational studies for 2 years, which is like which sort of prepares you for future studies, gets you ready for university. Then after that, I went to Sweden, to Västerås, to study there for 3 years. I did my bachelor's there, and then I was accepted to the Liceu Conservatory in Barcelona, where I spent the last 2 years studying my master's degree. And now my hopefully the final step in my career as a student will take place in Dublin, where I will start this September with my recital artist diploma. So that's sort of my career as a student of music.
Okay, that's quite a curriculum already. Is military service in Finland obligatory, or it was your decision to go there?
It's obligatory. It's mandatory.
It's obligatory. Okay, I think it's a good thing actually. So it seems like a very big gap in between what you were doing in life and this moment. I want to pause for a second on the military service,
cool.
Because it is seemingly such a different thing to do, but I think it can teach many people many things, and it comes down to being a practitioner eventually and just doing something for the sake of doing it, which we will come to a little later. So I just want to hear your thoughts on how military service affected your relationship to music, relationship to what you wanted to do in life further on, and how you approached it. Was it this moment that disturbed your education, or was it something that taught you something of value?
It was a moment that had the potential to disturb my education if I had let it, but I did not. In hindsight, it was a very useful experience, and I would definitely do it again. When you're doing it, of course, it sucks ass because it's uncomfortable and horrible, and you have to work all the time, and your feet hurt because you're standing all the time and so forth. But it was a really, really sort of maturing experience, I think. One of the best things about it was you really learned how to get along with people that you normally would not, because in life, especially if you live in a bigger city, you sort of have some say about who you hang out with and what sort of people you spend time with. But there you didn't. And if you couldn't get along with them, and if you couldn't get your stuff done, everyone suffered from it. So it sort of helped with this sort of perspective of getting along with all sorts of people from all sorts of walks of life. So that I think was the best thing that I learned from as a personal experience that I got from the military service. And music was very helpful for me during the military service. Sometimes when we had a extremely shitty day after we were done with the service time and we got like 3 hours of leisure time in the evenings, starting about 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, I'd sometimes just crash on my bed and I'd start listening to music. I'd listen to some concertos, piano concertos, and so forth, and it helped me keep going. And it was also fun, or not fun, but it made me think a lot, because by then I was already like certain that this is what I'm going to do, and this is what I'm going to start studying. And it was funny to see how some people there, because we were 19 at that time, so there were some guys there who also shared some sort of a thing that they already knew what they want to do, but there were a lot of, I'd say the majority of the people were so that they didn't really know what to do. They didn't really know what to do yet, but that's understandable. They're 19.
Yeah.
But it's throughout my life, I've noticed that it's been a sort of it's been a burden because it's really hard and it's really difficult. But it's also a huge resource to have like this sort of thing that you're investing your power in for such a long time. That's something I noticed in the military service. And I'd been accepted to the Conservatory of Oulu, which is a bit more northbound in Finland, and so the conscription time is depending on what you do. It's either 6 months or 1 year or 1.5 years. And if I had spent 1 year there, I think I would have lost my ability to play, because I was a combat engineer, so I was carrying stuff all the time and digging stuff and having like this sort of tense vibration in my hands all the time, which is really bad for piano playing, or like having the delicacy in your fingers. So if I had spent the whole year there, I would have most likely lost my place of study. So I opted to only stay half a year. I did everything as well as I could. So the officers were lenient with my requests, and I was promoted into Lance Corporal. So that was nice.
And what about discipline? Because I'm coming from a long dynasty of military people, and the discipline is something that is, it's a red thread, that goes through all the experiences of all the people I've met who have dedicated their life to the military service. Mm-hmm. So how was it like from this perspective? Because I think it can teach a lot people in the terms of applying yourself to doing something constantly and repeatedly.
Do you mean like how discipline was taught there, or how it was implemented?
No, how it affected your relationship to being disciplined after, because both things you're doing, in order to become a professional pianist, you have to be very, very disciplined.
Yes.
This is something that I think many people who have never met professional musicians and have never done music themselves don't realize that in order, it's not some talented guy or girl, just sitting on the instrument and then suddenly, oh, look at me, I'm Beethoven, It's a meticulous work. And I think piano is one of the most time-consuming and the most competitive fields. So
definitely the most competitive, I would say. The violin and the piano are the most competitive fields, I would say. Yeah.
And it's many, many hours a day. How many hours a day do you practice?
Now it's between 6 and 8.
6 and 8 hours a day. So it's like having a job.
Yes.
Many people work these times. And
yes, but that's like 6 to 8 hours of playtime, like time spent at the piano. That also takes a lot of maintenance.
Yeah, of course. So what I meant is that both becoming a professional musician and both serving in the army require a lot of discipline. In army, this is a bit different. For people who are not choosing it as their career and don't have the army as their calling. It's more of a forced kind of behavior. You have to do this because your superior says so.
Definitely, yes.
When in the music, it's something that you choose. So you're doing it from passion that comes from within. And how does these two modes of being disciplined complement each other? Or was it disruptive that someone is forcing you into doing something you don't see much sense in? Or is it really a good life lesson in the army? What would you say about that?
It's a good life lesson because it can dissipate any sort of delusions of grandeur that you might have about yourself. And there are definitely different sorts of discipline, these two. And I guess I would call the one that you spend your time with in the army a sort of outer discipline. You have to do what this outer thing is telling you to do, and you have to do it with everyone else. So it's also group discipline. Whereas, like you said, in practicing music, it has to be a really inner thing because at the end of the day, you're completely responsible for your progress. Of course, your teachers have an immense influence, but they don't mean anything if you don't put in the work yourself, and if you can't keep at it constantly and consistently. And by that time, I was already practicing like 4 hours a day, 4 to 6 hours a day before I went to the army. So I already had that sort of discipline going, and I had hobbies when I was younger. I was also in the swimming team for like 7 years, so I knew that there you sort of had both the outer and the inner discipline, because there you had the coach. You had to do what you were told. If you cheat, you sort of only cheat from yourself, and also you felt pretty good. You felt really good when you got better, so that also helped with maintaining the sort of inner discipline. So I'm not certain it helped. I'm not certain the stuff that we learned about discipline in the army helped my piano playing or my practicing per se, but it did help a lot with how to look at life and how to react to certain events or certain situations.
Yeah, it's very humbling.
Yes, humbling, definitely.
You have to get good superiors also, because sometimes it can be very damaging. I've heard different stories. I have people who've been very inspired by the army service, and I've heard people who are really damaged by it because their superiors were not good leaders and they were not able to transmit them the values, but they were rather just trying to, suppress their will by any means, which is a very different thing. I guess it's the same with the teachers. You can find a teacher that is really interested in your development as a student, and the teacher who just want to impose their way of doing things on you. And so there's also
and also teachers that don't care.
Also teachers that don't care. I think it's the worst. It's the worst one, because at least when the teacher is imposing on you something, you still learn from it. You still learn how to manage yourself in the situations in life. But teachers that don't care, it can be very, very damaging, I think, both for the craft and for the personal kind of core values and worldviews.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's move into the movement stuff.
Cool.
And why did you decide to come to Bamboo first? Let's answer this question.
Well, I didn't know anything about movement culture when I came there. I had started working out, like doing calisthenics, about a year before. So I'd been working out like that for about a year, because I had lost this sort of athletic routine in my life, and I started to notice the side effects. So I decided to take better care of myself. So the Bamboo School is just like 2 blocks away from where I lived in Barcelona, and I was running past that place often. And I saw all these cool hippie sort of people standing outside, and like, well, what's this place? And then I checked it out online, checked out your webpage, and I saw that there's some like body weight training stuff going on and stuff, and calisthenic things and things of that ilk. So I thought it would be nice to have like a group to do it with, and also to have someone who's teaching you. So I was very surprised when I came there, and I think the first lesson, I don't remember what we were doing, like different ways of sitting down or something. I don't quite remember. I was just thinking like, what the fuck have I gotten myself into? But then after like I think it was the second week or the first week there I was there. You gave this sort of a firebrand speech about what movement practices, and I was thinking like, hey, wait a minute, this sounds pretty familiar. So let's keep going. Let's keep going at this. So then I came back. Then I decided to still do it in December, and then I really started to get into it. So it's just happenstance, just a mistake that I came there.
Okay, that's a nice mistake. So it wasn't something like you saw it and it was a calling. So it was absolutely accidental. Okay,
completely accidental.
Fair enough. And okay, so in general, doing any physical activity for musicians is not something that I see very often. I have a couple of people coming to the school who dedicated their life to music. And there was always this kind of idea of like, oh, I cannot do this because my hand will lose dexterity. Oh, I cannot do that because if I get too strong, I will not be able to play that well. Like, oh, I cannot damage the skin from hanging because it will damage my playing. And you stayed and you were working on you developed quite a good strength skills and you were already quite athletic. So what do you say about that? Why is there such a strong belief in the music industry that they don't need movement, and even not just don't need, but the movement practice and physical practice will damage their skill in music? And what will you say to these people? And so both ways, why is it such a strong belief about that? And how is it not true from your own perspective?
I suppose it's ignorance to the practice of athletics. Definitely, I would not start like powerlifting or maybe bodybuilding or something like that, where you have to carry like 200 kilos in your hands or anything like that. I think that will have some sort of a eventually will have some sort of a detriment, because that's also very taxing on your body and on your structures, which playing 6 to 8 hours every day already is. So I'm not sure. It's a very foolish way to think. That's true. There's this saying that some people say, at least here, that music saved me from sports. Like music saved me from doing athletics, because now they have like an excuse not to do it. But it really is an excuse. And I've seen enough professionals who start to lose their full mobility at the age of 40, age of 50, and I didn't want to do that. And also, I was thinking about this when I was like 18 or 19, and I was talking about this with my mom about like how afraid should I be of like doing things with my hands, and should I keep away from like skiing and playing squash and doing pull-ups and so forth. And my mom said to me, like in a really sort of laconic way, that are you gonna set up your life so that you won't be able to pull yourself up? And I was like, shit, that's rather emasculating. No, no, I'd rather not. No, but it's it's ignorance to how sports and how athletics should be set up. Definitely, if someone hasn't been doing any athletics ever, and then they start, they're gonna be worse off for like the first 2 weeks or first month or something like that. And people get scared. This I've heard before. Like they get scared of that. They get scared that that's how they're going to be for the rest of their lives if they do sports, and then they stop. So that's not good. What was the second question?
why do you think it's not? Why would you say to these people this is not true? This belief?
Because I've seen it when it's done right. It does not hurt your music. It doesn't hurt your ability to play. It doesn't hurt your practice. It doesn't hurt your progress. All it does is makes you feel better, and you can play longer if you're in better shape.
Yeah, it's. I have worked with someone who was a violin player, and piano is a very ergonomic instrument. You sit straight and you can maintain a good posture.
I think it's the most ergonomic. I think it's the most ergonomic.
It's the most, the most ergonomic, because all the other instruments, because they are fixed structure and they cannot adapt to you. You have to adapt to them. So the body kind of takes the shape of the instrument. So this person I was working with, who was a professional violin player in a liceo, actually conservatory.
Oh, really?
She has really bad problems with the neck and the shoulders, and she was not even 30, and she has had horrible pains, and that was a result of her playing violin for many, many years, but not compensating it in any way with movement, which would be really helpful for many people. And I would say this to many people who play a musical instrument, that you don't have to deteriorate like this, and you don't have to be in pain all the time, because you can have a capable body and you can still play an instrument as well. So you wrote this master's thesis, which was a really good job. It's on our website, but it's a lot of reading. And I would really recommend people to read it, but with the short attention span, I guess maybe not everyone would be up to that. And the theme of the thesis was how movement practice, as taught in Bamboo Body and as taught by Edo Portal, has actually made you a better piano player.
Yes.
So can you talk about this and explain to people who either not familiar with what we're doing, or just have never experienced how does it feel to be in the body that is not just used to one mode of living, like hunched over an instrument, but has a 360 degree of freedom, and also gives you more tools to develop better skill at music.
Oh, that's a long question. Hang on.
Okay, let's break it down. Why and when you decided to write thesis on this topic?
When I noticed concrete change in the way that I was playing and in the way that I was practicing and setting up my practice after 1 month of doing it. That's when I noticed that the change was so powerful, or the effect was so powerful, that this would be an interesting topic. Yeah.
Can you be more specific? What was the moment, and what was the thing you were doing, and how exactly it affected your piano playing?
Yes. It was when we were working with eye movements. This was in November or December. I don't now remember it, but it was the first or the second month, and we had been working on this thing where your partner holds up a tennis ball and you have to follow it with your eyes and so forth, and you get better control over your eyes, and you're able to disconnect them a bit more from your neck muscles and from the rest of your body. And then when I noticed that I was playing this one piece and there was a super difficult passage in it, and my eyes were going back and forth between my hands, and I was thinking about what we were doing on the lesson, on your lesson, and I thought, okay, if I just fix my eyes on my left hand and keep them there, what will happen? And bam, bam, every time, bam, perfect. Then I started paying attention to the other things. That's when I started paying more attention on your lessons, because I was like, hey, she's up to something. She's up to something. And I noticed that the things kept accumulating. So yeah, it gives you a better control over your nervous system. So what could be bad about that?
Yeah, that's the basic, I think, description of what do. We make you control better your nervous system. But even though it's much more than that, but what would you say to the people who ask you, someone who is your colleague, and they ask you, what is this weird things you're doing with your body? And what would you tell them?
I would tell them that what we're actually doing is we're learning the process of learning. Like we're teaching ourselves how to learn things better. And at the end of the day, it's the same thing we do with the piano. And it's what I always say to my students. And I try to really get them to understand it. Like it doesn't really matter the fact that they learn to play the piano is secondary. The primary thing that I'm trying to teach them is how to learn things, which is why also what you've talked about resonates with me, because it sounds familiar, and it sounds very useful. But if my colleagues ask like a really quick question, I sometimes just say, yeah, it's sort of working out, taking better care of my body. And then if they ask like more, then it's like, well, listen. And yeah, I'd say it's honing your nervous system, keeping your body more resilient so you can play longer, and also finding better discipline, and finding like this sort of willpower. Because if you can get yourself to practice for a handstand, for instance, which for a pianist is not on the list of most important skills in life, but it takes it takes like a year to get it together. But if you can find the power, and you can find the discipline to keep working at that, it will be easier to find it when you're doing something that's more important to you. For instance, when practicing the piano, or setting up your practice and making schedules for yourself. If you can do it for something else that you sort of like, but is unimportant, then you'll be able to do it for something that you like and that is important.
Yeah, it's kind of something that I'm really trying to transmit to people, and it really makes me happy when I see people actually getting that movement is such a huge umbrella, that it's more about the fact of being a learner all the time. And the practice can be anything. If from the perspective that I look at things, which is the movement perspective, it allows me to see playing the piano as movement practice.
Oh, yeah.
So it gives me an angle to look at all the things from the same side, but at the same time to look at them from all the different angles. And it all comes down to this notion of being a practitioner.
Yes.
Because besides professional athletes and people who are really involved in the movement culture, maybe even more than us, and I would say professional musicians know very well what does it mean to be a practitioner. And
the things that you were talking about when it comes to being like practice, they were very, very familiar things. Like some of them were already like in my head, like, yeah, if you want to get better at something, this is what you have to do. And it's like clear. It's pretty clear.
This is, I think, what it's one of the most important things to transmit to people is this understanding that it doesn't matter what you're doing. If you're not becoming a practitioner of this thing, it will never bring any fruits. First of all, like, you will not get better at this, but also it kind of gives you this inner fuel, because life is not about becoming. Life is not about reaching something. Life is about constantly becoming something else.
Yes.
You know, like, we're always close, we're almost there, but we're never actually there. How can you ever arrive to be the piano player? You know, you never will. Even the greatest at their craft, they always continue learning, and that's actually what makes them greatest. You always can see by the humbleness of realizing that you don't know everything about something, which the person has reached the heights of their profession.
True.
So when you were a little kid, that is something that I'm always thinking about. How does it happen that you became a practitioner? Was it something just your love to the music? Because there are many people who start doing music and then they never continue. And we talked about the teachers and we talked about the practice. Do you think it's all of these things need to come together in order to make a practitioner out of someone? Or there is one of them that is overweighting the other? Like, for example, finding a good teacher is very important, and then it will bring you to the point of doing the practice. Or just falling in love so much with the craft will make you a practitioner, and then finding a teacher is already a question of, just bouncing back and forth from one person to another.
It's sort of both of those things, because that would of course be optimal if all of those things happen. But I think the most important thing for any sort of practitioner of any field is motivation. Because if you lose motivation, then you lose everything. Doesn't matter if you have a really good teacher. If you're not motivated, it won't do anything. It won't do you any good. And if you have that inner sort of fire for music, for instance, and then you lose it, you lose motivation. Or if you lose your motivation, you will lose the fire, and then you're screwed as well. But yeah, for me, because like I said, I was 13 when I started playing the piano, whereas most of my colleagues were like 6, 7 when they started, and for most of them, it's the fact that their parents put them in a, or not, I'm not going to say most of them, but for many of them, it's the fact that their parents put them in a music school and they turned out to be really, really good at it, or they turned out to learn really quickly, and that sort of got them going. There are also instances of this where there are like people who were really good at it, but they don't give a damn, and they didn't want to do it, and then they quit when they could. For me, I was always a sort of a curious child. My family and my friends made fun of me for always asking what or how or why, because I I wanted to understand. I wanted to understand things. So I suppose this sort of inner curiosity that I always had for any sort of skills that you could learn really helped me out in becoming a pianist. That I was. We also had a good teacher here in my hometown, which was of course very, very helpful. Yes, but yes, to answer your question, it would be best to have all of those like external things and internal things in line. It can happen if some of those things are missing, but if everything is missing, it just won't happen.
Yeah, that's it's just I'm thinking often which one is the most important thing, because for me it was very clearly finding the right teacher, and moving into the direction.
I think it's much more rare to find a really, really, really good student with a really, really bad teacher.
Yeah.
than the other way around.
Yeah, but also I met many people who have been exposed to the same teacher and they have never connected to the thing,
True.
And they just dismissed it as not as good or not as important for them.
True.
So it's just the movement for me was such a thing that kind of makes sense for all the things, I think in my case, I've connected to the idea of movement perspective because it gives you such a wide lens. And then it allows you to go into all the fields, into the music, into athleticism, into performing arts, and with the same kind of approach. My father used to say, when the person is talented, he's talented in everything. And I think what he meant, like, I don't like the word talent, like it's not, and people like you and others that I know who are really involved into their profession with their whole heart. Talent is not the word I would use for them. Talent is a bad word. Talent means that there's something that was given to you, but if you really scratch under the talent, you will find that 6-8 hours a day of work.
Talent means luck, sort of. That's
exactly.
That's not interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of takes from you the agency. So okay, like if I don't have talent, then I won't be able to do these things. And this is not how it works. The practice and talent for me, talent is dismissive. For me, anyone that I admire, who I see as the figure that reached the excellence in their craft, not reach the excellence, but is constantly reaching the excellence. That would be a better way to say it.
Yes.
They come around as talented people, but in reality, they are just aware of how to learn things very well. And this phrase that my father was saying talks to that you just need to be able to approach things with the same kind of eye for the quality and for learning the essence of it. And of course, making an effort, because you cannot, however involved and interested you are, if you don't put the 6 to 8 hours a day, you're not going to do anything about it.
And the skill of learning, I would say.
Skill of learning. Yeah. That's if to cut short everything I was just saying, I think that's what it comes down to, the skill of learning.
Yes.
Okay, so for you, the music was the vehicle to learn all these things, and then you found movement practice by the chance.
Yes.
And now, from what I know, you're aiming to continue doing the movement practice because it's so beneficial.
Yes, indeed.
Would you, for example, when you are taking on the students for the piano practice, implement some of the work that we did in the classes and that you will continue learning for them to become better at piano? Not just the abstract concepts of the learning, but actual physical tools.
Actual physical tools. I'm not certain I would use actual physical tools because there's you have to practice them as well. They're just like do this and you'll become better. No, it doesn't. I don't think that's how it works. And at least at the moment, I don't feel qualified enough to start teaching movement practice to anyone. But what movement practice has done is it really has like cemented the things that I already knew were important as really important, and I'm more vehement when I'm trying to get them across to my students, and when I try to get them to understand it and to really take it in. Yes.
Yeah. So it is taking the content out of the container and not, because the form can change. It can be a scale on the piano, or it can be a spinal wave.
Yes.
But the structure stays the same.
Exactly.
It makes me really glad when I see people seeing this, and I really see a big potential in you as a teacher for other people and as becoming a concert pianist. You told me there is a difference between being a classic pianist and a concert pianist.
It's sort of just professional jargon.
Professional jargon. It's not for people who are not into music. That will be
not for you. Not for you commoners. No.
And would you expand the movement practice? Kind of goes under this notion of constantly expanding into the more general view of things. So do you think, maybe not now, but later in your career, you will expand your repertoire? Because now you are playing classical music, and you said you started with blues and jazz. Do you think there is value on kind of crossing the disciplines? Definitely,
there's value in that. I have some friends who are sort of crossing the fields, and I admire them very much for doing so, and it's cool that they have been able to like combine all of these things. But at the end of the day, it's also that it does not interest me that much anymore to do it. sort of like you like moving, and tap dancing is pretty cool movement, but it's not. I assume it's not that important for you or that interesting for you that you would start investing your time in it, even though you would already have a lot of the things like in common because you're already very capable in moving yourself.
Yeah.
So that would very easily cross over into tap dancing or ballroom dancing, whatever sort of dancing it might be. And that's sort of how I feel with the music, because it's not so that if you're able to do this sort of music, you will automatically be able to do this. If someone just tells you to, okay, now play that, it doesn't work like that. It's a completely different world of aesthetics, and it's a completely different world of harmony and sonority and rhythm handling. So I sort of, it doesn't, or I wouldn't say that it doesn't interest me that much. It's just that the world of classical music interests me so much more that I rather invest myself completely in it.
It is a huge field to study. I don't know very much about classical music, but from very little I know.
Four centuries of music that's written. There's plenty of material there to work on. Yeah,
plenty of material, and it's a very rigid is not the word, I guess, but people don't. It can be rigid. People don't really write classical music anymore.
They do, but it's different. It's very few composers nowadays who like compose music in the sense that we understand compositions. Don't really break into the sort of main sphere anymore. It's the world is different. The world is different. Popular culture is different. So it's sort of lost its status as this like grand music that the society would all be listening to, even though it wasn't really like everyone would. Back in the time when all this music was written, it was mostly the people who lived in the cities who got to witness it. People in the countryside were just playing with the fiddle and playing these folk songs and folk dances and so forth.
Yeah, it's also very admirable when people dedicate themselves to just one thing, because every single one thing has so much depth in it.
That's true.
That the downside, to say, of movement practice is because it's so broad that you never actually dive into so much depth into just one thing.
Right.
And that's a choice. Also, for me, it was a choice to choose this over being specialized in one field. And you can never, like, people call me and others like movement specialists. You cannot be movement specialists. This thing doesn't exist because movement is so big. Like, there's nothing, I don't have eyes enough to even realize how big it is. And the human life is just as short. So, I guess that's the thing that scares many people from the practice. But even for people who are interested in specializing only in one field, whether it's music or athletic endeavor or whatever, martial arts, I think it's important. And an example of your self is that even being such a broad and vast territory, movement practice and the concepts from it can be useful even for the people who are interested in specializing in only one field.
Definitely, because you're learning the skill of learning, and that's useful in basically everything you do. It's useful even in the things that you're not trying to specialize yourself in, because you learn something new every day. So if you're better at learning, you learn it better every day. That's
as Ido says, that's a life practice, and it's such an abstract thing to say. What does it mean, life practice? But then you actually encounter all the things that you encounter in the movement practice in your everyday life all the time, and it just helps you to take them on in a better way.
Yes, that's what I liked. What movement practice for me was the practice of practice. That's why I liked it, because I saw that it can be used in everything. So it became, through its uselessness, it becomes very useful.
That's a good one. Okay, I think that's a good place to wrap it up.
Cool.
Do you want to say anything to anyone, to people who either want to study music or are studying music, or anything? Any last words before you're done?
Shit. What? Motivation. Don't lose your motivation. If you're having problems with motivation, get it back. Once you lose it, you're done.
Don't you think motivation is more important than discipline? Because sometimes you do not have motivation.
Discipline can be lost momentarily, but you can get it back, I think. If motivation gets lost, it can be more difficult to get back. And also, if you lose motivation, it's easier to lose discipline, in my view. I think that's the way it works that way, I think.
How do you define motivation then?
Oh.
I wanted to wrap it up, but I entered a new territory.
Oh, that's a really good question. That's the sort of things, everyone knows what motivation is, but try to explain what motivation is to someone who doesn't know what motivation is. I guess it's sort of like the putting up with not being where you want to be and still wanting to do it in order to reach where you want to be, and constantly keeping that in sort of living with where your goals are, and in respect to where you've been, and to paying attention to your journey along it, and keeping your sort of spirit up. That I would suppose is motivation. I don't know. Look it up.
The art of becoming, as we said before. Good. That's even better place to wrap it up. Thank you, Kalle. It's a pleasure to talk to you and to have you as a student. And to anyone who has you as a teacher as well, that will be a huge pleasure, I think.
Thank you very much, Anna. It was a pleasure.